Grab your coffee and join me, Nicoa, for a caffeinated conversation about life. I'll be talking to people who have chosen to walk their own paths and, just like me, are creating a life by design. I hope it will give you the inspiration you need to do exactly the same. Hey everybody, welcome to Coffee with Nicoa. It's Nicoa and my really good friend William Stadler, who I have known now since, I wanted to say 2008, 2009.
It's probably around that time, 7, 8, or 9. One of those years.
Because that's when you were mastering your barista hood.
Yep.
At Starbucks.
At Starbucks. But you'll be sad to know that I've forgotten your drink.
Yeah. Oh, you forgot my drink? Come on.
Yep.
Come on now.
I cannot remember it at all. It's been years now.
I think back then I was heading off to my big HR job. Ironically, now that we look at your career,
right?
I was at Allscripts and I probably was getting a venti non-fat latte with an extra shot.
Sadly, I can see that now. I can see that drink.
That's right, you see it. And I remember once when you weren't giving me my coffee, some other girl, she was new. She was giving me my coffee and she handed it to me and I knew by weight if it was accurately done. And I said, I think you put too much foam in here.
Yep. You can tell the difference. When you're good at it, you know when there's a lot of foam versus shot, that ratio is real. So
exactly.
Yeah. But I will give it to you, Nicola. But you were always a good customer because you weren't like mean to us, like some people when we messed up drinks.
I was just some plain talk, values based is what I said.
That's exactly right.
Hey, dear, I think you messed up.
That is 100% true.
Oh my God, I loved getting to know you. And then let me give a quick overview of where you are now so people know the amazing career you've had since then. So everybody, William Stadler, he's been in a variety of disciplines, which is really what's cool about this conversation. It's because when I got to know him, he was in a very different place. And then now, good Lord, what a great life by design you've created with your wife, and you have 4 beautiful children. You had 2 girls, a boy, and a girl, right?
That's right. Yep.
I remember the order.
In that order. Yep.
In that order. They're homeschooling them now. And all along you have been growing your career. You've got your education from NC State, go Wolfpack, and also from Western Carolina University, which you went back and got that master's degree. I think you got that in 2017, something like that, which seems like just the other day.
I know. It feels like that to me too. I was like, really? This is crazy. It's crazy to think about it, but that was like 7 years ago.
And then you jumped into human resources, which you don't even reference the educational endeavor that you went on when we started talking. So I can't wait to go back to that. But now you're in HR and you work for Red Hat and you've also been with Google now.
Yep.
I'm just really overwhelmed by your beautiful career. And not to mention, so everybody, what's really unique about William is that he maintains these traditional careers, but he and his wife, Nicole, I think they like to be a bit of a set of pioneers here in this whole thing called life. And he has published a dozen science fiction books. I mean,
science fiction. Yep.
Well, I can barely get one freaking journal out. Are you?
Right. Yep. That's crazy.
And you play the bass, and I saw you zooming, like doing a Zoom session online on one of your Instagram accounts. Posts and you've got reptiles living at the house.
It's you got all of these interests and just things just pop up and you're like, hey, let me go and see if I am interested in this, and you put time in it, and sometimes you put things down,
Well, tell me about that, because I think when I did this homework on you after having not really, I mean, we don't hang out a lot. We're just acquaintances, but I feel so close to you. I was thinking, how would I describe William's life by design? And I would say you have a foundation of creativity and maybe even a sense of fearlessness. How would you describe your foundation in life?
I think that creativity is spot on. And interesting enough, fearlessness, tenacity, I think they kind of go hand in hand. And, I look at it like, if I'm interested in something, I need to give it a shot, because what's not on the I don't know, CV, whatever, is that I picked up the flute at one time and I was like, this is not for me. Then I went back to it later on and then realized this is not for me.
Still not for you.
Still not for me.
William, if you look up there, I want you to look right there behind me. You see that little black case? That will be my flute. That's my flute. I played for 10 years and then went back twice. And it's like, I didn't really want to do that either. Keep going.
Yeah, it's not the same. Yeah, but so but you do find things that you're interested in, right? So like I have 4 snakes, and I love these snakes. They have no concern for me at all. They don't care about me. They just want to eat and hang out. But I care about them, and I make sure that they're safe. But it's just because I have a love for reptiles. And when it comes to the bass guitar, you have the creative side of wanting to explore music. And then you go back and you listen to Motown and a lot of these other just amazing bass guitarists. And you're just thinking, I want to be at least somewhat like that, right? A Blink like that, and you realize people like Prince and Les Claypool, like the whole list of people who just can play this instrument. So I find myself researching the top performers or top executors of those fields, like even in writing with writers like Stephen King or George Martin or Brandon Sanderson with fantasy and science, sci-fi. It's just loving life and figuring out what you can do and what you don't like.
Now, were you raised that way? Was that always kind of a part of your upbringing about being creative and pursuing your creative interests?
So raised to pursue them, no, but raised to be able to explore. Like my mom was always free with like, whatever you want to do. And, you try to get some advice from her. Her advice to me always, well, whatever you want to do, and she'll support it. So that was amazing. So you have this whole open window of like, what do I want to do? And so I got into poetry a lot when I was younger in high school and stuff. And then I actually decided to write a novel, and that was 2012. That was my first one.
Yeah, you totally threw me off when I saw you publish that. I was like, what the hell? So I was like, wait, what? So when we first started talking every morning when I get my Starbucks.
Every morning
I was I was your favorite customer, I know.
Yeah, that's right.
There was a conversation that we had, and didn't we have the conversation before you came to the group coach training that I did? It was like this freebie. Like I needed students and you volunteered to participate. Wasn't it about physics and going back to class? Tell me that story.
Yeah. So at that time, when I was at NC State back in, the early 2000s, I was actually in chemical engineering. I loved chemistry and realized that I loved chemistry, but I didn't love the engineering side. So I got out of chemical engineering and didn't graduate. I graduated with a philosophy degree after 3 years of math and science and, organic chemistries, but, shifted over to philosophy because I just didn't like the engineering side that much. Well, back when you and I met, when I was at Starbucks, I had been doing some design engineering work, but it wasn't full engineering. And I was thinking, hey, I want to try this engineering thing again. So I was going into electrical engineering at that time, and electrical more so because it was adjacent to chemistry and chemical engineering. And I was like, I don't remember the periodic table like I used to. So I don't know if that's like the right thing to do after being, graduating for 10 years. And so that was the line that I went down. And then after about 2 years of that, I was like, this is really, again, not for me. And I hated it because you spend so much money doing this. And then you make a change and you make a pivot all over again,
Well, how did you have that conversation with yourself? Because what you just described is typically what prevents people from making changes. Because I've already spent all this money and all this time. And oh my God, I already went down one path and didn't like that. And, how did you have that dialogue with yourself, or were there people in your life influencing you?
There's always people in my life influencing. My wife, of course, and Michelle's been great and everything. But she's always supportive of, which I love, is always supportive of if I'm making a change to that magnitude. And one of the things, Nicoa, and you asked a tough question: how do you have that conversation with yourself? If you're chasing money, that's all you'll get. And realizing that early in my career, I just had to be like, I hate the fact that I've invested all of this money into this education that I'm no longer interested in. But if money was the object, that's what I would obtain. But the object was to have a fulfilling career and a fulfilling direction in my life. And if that's always the case, if that's always at the forefront, if it's always about serving others and making sure that you're self-motivated in that, then that's what you'll get in return. And so I look at it truly as an investment. This was money spent that I'm like, hey, I got some gains from it, but all I really lost was money and time, you know?
That's right. And you set a foundation to create more opportunities for money that was aligned with your purpose and passion, which is always more fulfilling.
Always.
You know, and it's never too late to change. I mean, I'm an example of that. I've gone through so many changes. You know, when I was at State, I quit the cheerleading thing. When I was at GE, I quit and went to another company, you know, and I've gotten divorced twice now. Did I tell you that part?
No, I didn't know that. No, yes. I didn't know that.
Well, I know I'm going through a divorce. It's really disappointing. But and I said to somebody the other day how proud I was of how brave I was to kind of pull the pin on the grenade and just say, no, this is not right. This is not working. And throw that grenade right in the middle of what looked like a perfect life.
Right.
And you have to follow that intuitive, you know, somebody said, well, oh my God, you feel like you wasted 5 years. I said, no. I grew up. I realized what mattered most. And I think that's the kind of conversation that, you know, you role model whether you realize that you're role modeling for people like me and others by continuing to pursue things of interest. Tell me about some of that self-dialogue, though, over the years. Is it a quick shift, or do you have to really work through it to overcome any insecurities?
Yeah, it's a work through. And here's a good example. One thing that's also not listed is I was a detention officer for 7 months, you know.
That's
and
right.
You remember, so I did that for a phase back in the day. And I remember working there, and I just was like, you know, I'd done some leadership or organizational training and stuff, and probably adjacent to that as well. But one night, and I worked the night shift, 12-hour shifts, and you kind of feel like you're an inmate also, because you can't really go anywhere. You have to stay in there with the inmates. And so every now and then you take a break. So I took a break. I went outside. It was cold. I love it when it's cold like that in North Carolina. Just that crisp, no humidity, just, you know. And so I sat out on the brick wall right in front of the jail. And Nicoa was so strange. I saw myself growing older in that uniform. And I was like, that's not what I want. I don't want to retire here. And fortunately, there are people who do, right? Because otherwise we'd be in a bad, but that just wasn't for me. And it was a phase of life. And so every time that I do have a shift, there is a moment of, this is what does my future look like? So to your point, you know, to ask you the question about your marriage, did you waste 5 years? Like, no, I spent my 5 years in this way and I learned a lot from it, right? And I don't feel like I wasted those 7 months. I don't feel like I wasted the, you know, 3 or 4 years that I was at Starbucks, right? That was a phase that I'll never forget. You and I met. You and one of the things that I love about you, and always, and I've talked to Michelle about this too, is you have a talent for spotting talent, right? And so, and maybe that's the HR side, that's obviously the innate Nicoa side, but so you came up and you talked with me and invited me to this coaching session, which I found a lot of value in, just learning about how to check myself whenever asking yourself, how are you feeling about this? And living, you said something I remember very vividly, which is living in the moment. When you're at home, you're at home. When you're at work, you're at work. And I use that a lot because sometimes they just blend together. And when I find that things are blending too much, I'll reset back to that. And if I can't reset, Nicoa, that's when I know I need to change. Either that's change jobs or change careers even, you know?
That's right. It makes me think about when I would say, you know, the minute now people aren't getting in their car as often driving to a job. Now that I say now when you put your hand on the mouse or you flip up your laptop, do you dread it? And if you're dreading it, that's just a messaging system from your body and your soul saying, hey, may not be working for me anymore, or I'm just out of balance right now and I need to go fill my cup a little bit. So it doesn't have to be extreme to where you have to quit. I don't want people thinking that you and I are walking around going, oh, whatever, next. Oh, let's just try something different. We have families to raise. We have mortgages to pay. these decisions aren't come by lightly. I'm glad you mentioned the coaching experience. That was new for me. I was getting trained for the first time through the Newfield Network, and that was part of the activity. Do you tell me more about what you remember about that class, if any, because I'm having a hard time remembering the exact.
Yeah, no, it was fine. So it was good for me because I was at Starbucks at the time, but we were meeting at a different Starbucks. So I at least felt out of climate, and
that's true. Of course we were. Of course we were meeting at Starbucks.
Yeah, I mean, like, why not, right? And so there was a small group of us, maybe about 5 or 6. And again, a lot of it was based on what I learned. I learned the term later when you gave me a book called Energy Leadership. That was basically the foundation of your coaching platform, is what energy are you feeling from yourself? And, and I really took that to heart, because I'm like, how again do I need to check my emotions, whether that's in a consulting situation or especially in some of those tough, being in HR, you're in tough conversations a lot, more often than normal. And you really need to be able to feel the energy of yourself and energy of the room. And also being able to your point that you reiterated often was, how do you reset? And again, I go back to that. Like, how do you reset and say, okay, what is my focus? What are my values? And what am I getting out of this? And being comfortable with yourself, knowing that there's value enough in yourself to get something for yourself, right? And I think in this American dream of appeal, we don't think of ourselves enough, but we should be arrogant, but we don't think of ourselves enough, right?
Because we're being told that we're not enough. And therefore, we're being told to be humble and make sure you don't overly brag, but don't forget to market yourself and don't forget to put yourself out there. It's a real challenge. And what we were trying to unfold in those conversations was, yes, the energy leadership toolkit, which is, one of those 7 levels of energy that you're viewing the world at any point in time, and that which one will serve you. And then the other piece of it was just this observation of self and your ontological way of being. So your way of being then, when you were working at Starbucks and we were doing that, compared to your way of being now, where would you say the biggest shifts have been over the years? Guess what, y'all? I published a book. Your Life by Design, a Coffee with Nicoa self-care coaching journal, is now available on Amazon. This interactive journal begins and ends with powerful queries, guiding you on a quest for the kind of life by design you don't need a vacation from. I've included an in-depth look at strategic self-care to empower you and hold you accountable to really getting to know your true self. It's time to prioritize you. Use the link in the show notes to buy yours today.
So that's a good question also. And I'll tell you what I tell people now when I'm coaching them, doing career coaching, just on the side or something, and just want to help someone else. I'll ask them a question of, what do you think the most important thing is in presenting yourself to a company? And they'll say, I'd say your experience, or how or your ability to do the job. And I'm saying, no. I said, 100% you're selling your confidence. And you will only make it as far in your career as your confidence will allow. Now, you do see people who are overconfident, and they will get in those jobs, and their competence will come into play. But there's so many people whose confidence alone will get them a position. And I was noticing when I looked back at 15 years ago, my confidence was at a low. I had all of these difficult life moments, and that's actually why I started writing novels to begin with. Wow. And I was just like, why do I think this way of myself, And so just through all of these circumstances, and again, I really have appreciated our relationship over the years, Nicoa, and just thinking of, hey, you are valuable, and going after the things that you want is not a bad thing. It's not selfish to take care of yourself.
No, it's not at all.
It seems crazy, but it's true. It's strategic, right?
Exactly. That's my favorite thing. Self-care is not selfish. It's strategic. Is there anything about those tough times that you could share with us? I don't want to pry, but I'd be curious. Yeah.
This is good. And coincidentally, the Olympics are its prime, and Simone's getting all of her medallions.
I'm enjoying it.
Right? Loving it. But I think she's made discussion of mental health a global topic, whereas we knew before it was not really, it was still, taboo. But for me, it's been a struggle even as far back as high school, dealing with depression, dealing with suicide and over the years, and especially being a Black male, which those things are not talked about in our community at all, right? And so
right.
Dealing with that for years and just being like, am I good enough? Am I worth it? And everything that you collect doesn't add value. The value comes from within, and so you can be married, you can get a house, you can get a job and all these other things and still be incomplete. Right. And so that was really my struggle. And the first time that I saw a counselor, it was weird. I'd never done that kind of thing. I didn't think it was really a me thing, but I was like, hey, I got to do something to take care of myself, because just like I would see a medical doctor for any physical ailments, I do need to see a mind doctor for,
right.
just going through these therapies. So I was fortunate enough to be at NC State at the time where they offered counseling for free for students so they could help their grad student program. And my counselor at the time just asked me the question, have I ever considered writing? And I thought about it for a while, and I actually thought, I tried journaling, but that really wasn't for me, because I was like, I already understand my thoughts, so I don't need to journal to get my thoughts, But being able to immerse myself into these fantasy and sci-fi worlds felt like that was the missing component. And Nicoa, when I tell you that not to the same degree, I don't deal with depression or suicide to nearly the same degrees at all. Now, I know what those triggers are, and I stay away from them. But at the same time, it is night and day difference,
Wow. First of all, I'm just so proud of you. I was talking with two of my kids this morning. We were all on FaceTime, and I was like, oh, where have you been? One of them just walked back in. Oh, I was at my counselor and my therapist. And then the other kid says, oh yeah, I meet mine on Zoom. And I was like, look at us all going to therapy. Yeah. So, but it's just a way of being now for this next generation. I mean, they're 20, 27, they're young, but they know that it's okay to ask for help. And I'm really proud of you for reaching out and getting help. Did someone say something to you, or did you just say, what, and I have better get some help now and go? Or
I really will say I'm glad of my own personal self-awareness, right? And also being humble enough to myself, not to others, because others wouldn't have thought that I needed this. William, you're great. You're always the life of the party and all this, But asking myself, why am I doing this, and why am I treating myself this way?
Yeah. And what's the conversation nowadays? How do you still see a therapist, or do you have a new way of dialoguing with yourself?
No, so I don't see a therapist now, but I'm always open to it. And I always know, like, if I get into that mindset, like, I know where I need to go, right? But I also, again, I mentioned the triggers. I know what was triggering those types of behaviors, right? And that's when I learned, Nicoa, that I'm an introvert. You can believe it. At the time, I'd been alive for like 35 years or 30 years or whatever, and didn't realize that I thought I was an extrovert because everybody said I was,
That's a good point. Yeah. And so you were probably being overstimulated and in environments that were chaotic that might cause you to need to retreat. Was that it? Part of that gap?
That was the gap, because I would be like, why am I not the life of the party tonight? Or why am I not, why am I not the one who is making everybody laugh and getting everybody engaged and being hospitable to everyone and making sure why am I not feeling that right now? And it's because I now know that I need to recharge. Who would have thought, right? Who would have thought?
I believe you, because I think we're very similar. I often joke now that I'm an introverted extrovert.
Yep.
And I found this out to be rather profound in the last 4 months since my husband and I split, and I'm an empty nester this year.
Oh, that's a lot.
I had not been alone in this house since I was a latchkey kid. This happens to be my family home that I bought from my father. But I'm walking around this house going, I like this. Right. This is nice. I think I'm going to go to bed now. It's 5:40. Right? Or I think I'm going to get up and turn the music up full blast, and it's 5 a.m. I mean, I found that I really love myself, and I'd never really had enough time alone to reflect on that in the last 55 years. And It is kind of shocking. I think I share the story because, like you said, it'd been 35 years and you're like, oh my God, I'm an introvert. Everybody step back and notice what labels that you're living under and you're trying to live up to. Maybe they aren't naturally or authentically yours. Maybe there's a new way of being, which is what the coaching we talked about, which was ontological, a way of being. And what way of being makes you feel most comfortable and authentic?
Right. And I think that's where I had to really ask myself is, how can I be sure that I can look out for other people? That's a nature for me, and it's going to never change. And I love that about myself, but also look out for myself in that same vein. Right. And so I'm like, okay, I know that we're going to go on vacation and visit family members for a week at a time. I need to recharge ahead of time for a couple of days. That's whether that's reading or writing or just going off by myself, go see a movie by myself or something. And then I can be fully engaged when I'm there. And it goes back to the point that you made, which is when I'm there, right? But I know that I'm going to be disconnected if I don't get that time to recharge, right?
That's beautiful. And getting out ahead of it is what I call that. If I can get out ahead of it and I can anticipate it, you have to spend time, though, visualizing what do you want that time to look like. And most people just are hurrying to get ready to go on the vacation. And then it takes them 3 days into the 1 week vacation before they're actually relaxed. And half the time they got 1 foot in and 1 foot out and they're frustrated. You know, I have a question for you. I had a friend the other day who said, they did something for someone because it was the right thing to do. It's what they wanted. It aligned with their values, but the whole time they were annoyed about it. And while they were in it, they were kind of passive aggressive with the person they were with. How do we help people? So my question to her was, well, why?
Yeah.
Why couldn't you just be there? And she was like, because I wanted him to know I was annoyed. And I was like, well, what if you had just said, I'm really annoyed? I'm like,
that's it.
I get confused with why people don't just commit. Once they're in it, commit to it. Has that ever been a struggle for you, really committing, or think like, what if you didn't get ahead of it and get your own cup filled up?
Yeah. No, I without question, right? And I think that's just what I experience in normal human interaction, is because you're like, hey, I love everything that I'm doing, and I love that but I got this one hang up that I'm just holding on to, right? And I found to that point, if you don't bring it up and just say it, then you end up holding on to it and ruining the whole experience, right?
For everybody, not just for
everybody.
You. Yeah.
For everybody. And I think a good example is after 15 years of marriage, that's really a lot better to just go ahead and say it in a nice way. And then you're not like upset for 3 and 4 days, right?
Exactly.
So it's like, hey, we said what's going on, and here it is. We talk about it for 30 minutes and then we can move on. And I think that's where it's my own personal learning, going back to that, which is caring about myself enough to admit when I'm offended, right? And instead of just holding on to it and continuing to be offended, because that offense is going to stay there, and we have to figure out what we want to do with it. Because to that point again, what are we going to do with this excess energy, right? Because it's going to sit there.
And if you're offended and you haven't spoken your truth, then you're actually abandoning yourself by not speaking up. And I think that's what happens over and over and over again until people build that up, and then they're like, become the martyr, right?
Yep.
They end up the victim to their circumstance, and who they're really mad at, most likely, or if they're in that fighter mentality of blame, if they look in the mirror, they're really mad at themselves for not speaking their truth.
100%.
Now, talk to me about these beautiful babies and how you guys have been. I mean, when we first met, when was the first baby born?
So the first one was born in 2010.
So right after we met.
Yeah, right after we met.
Can I just, before you talk about the baby, it just made me think of something. I thought about this before, and I would like to share this because you're in human resources and I'm in human resources. And if anybody listening, any leaders out there, anybody, I had an unconscious bias about who you were and what your life was because you were a barista at Starbucks.
Mm.
I did not know you. I think you'd already finished school when we. So I had assumed that you were just some young student working at Starbucks with no purpose in life. I mean, I didn't consciously think these things, but I realize it now because then afterwards I was like, holy shit, he's married? Wait, what? He's got a life? What, they had a kid? Oh my God, he just wrote a book. It's like you're in your own world so much, and you just have a glance of a relationship with somebody. So you make up a whole freaking story, which I didn't really make up much of a story at all about you. But I loved our interactions. And then it was like you continued to surprise me over and over again, which, by the way, should not have been any surprise whatsoever.
It makes sense because I love that you say that. And I think it's a self-admission on my own part where I made up my own self-worth based on that role, right? And I had to, when I worked as a barista, I had to tell myself, like, I am going to do this the most excellent way. You know what? And so that's why I wanted to spend extra time learning people's drinks and making sure that the store was clean. And I'm not just saying this as a cliche. I really live by this principle when I worked as a barista. I was like, hey, this is where life has me right now. And so I'm going to make the most of it. So I still look back and I love this. I'm not saying this as a cliche. I love that I work there, and I go in sometimes and I've find myself valuing that whole experience because I know what I went through. And again, labeling myself as a barista and thinking that somehow like what's left of me, you know?
Well, you and I would not have become close if you hadn't taken that job so seriously.
That's true.
And that's why I loved interacting with you, because I clearly felt a connection to what you had to bring to the table. And I never would have invited you to join me if I didn't think you were going to be a profound member of that group. And you were. And it was just, it was so helpful for me. I was like, this guy, like I knew that you and I could sit here and talk all day long just from our short interactions, because you gave your all. And when you show up, people need to remember you're all unique. We're all supposed to be having these powerful interactions. I mean, look at the pipeline of, outcomes as a result of all of our interactions with each other. Yep. I mean, even fast forward when Mert and I were in Eastern Europe, just a quick stop off to Dublin, and you're texting me. You're like, "Oh my God, can you buy me a bottle of Writer's Tears?" That was
you made my day.
That was so great.
You made my day getting Writer's Tears for me, and the fact that you were just really that close to it, and it just over the top made my day. I can't even
was so fun. No, so for those listening, Writer's Tears, it's a whiskey. Irish whiskey, and you were a writer, and how you needed to have your glass of Writer's Tears while you were writing. Course. So now I will tell you, fast forward, I saw them in a local ABC store the other day.
So I think they started selling them here, but you couldn't find them before.
You couldn't get them then.
You couldn't get them here. And so I had checked multiple ABC stores looking for them. I couldn't find them.
You should have seen me. I'm running through the Dublin airport because we weren't even visiting Ireland. We were just in the airport, right? Yep. And I'm like, Mert, I got to go. And I go over to duty free, and I'm like, man, this is it, right? Let's get it. Yep. I hurried back, and we made it to the flight, and I was just so pleased to be able to bring you that surprise. I mean, you asked for it, but still.
But it was, and I just, like I said, I saw it on somebody's post on Twitter, and for years, I was trying to get one for years. People would go to Ireland and they couldn't bring it, for whatever reason. I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy,
Oh, that's
just one bottle.
Cool.
Yeah. So it was amazing.
I love that. Well, let's talk about how are you taking this insight? I'm really curious about the energy leadership too, because you were learning it when your children were being born. How have you applied it with raising your kids?
That's another good question, because I think about it often of making sure that I'm raising my kids to be the best them they can be, the best individual that they can be, free from my own like biases and perceptions, right? And that's tough to do because you may want them to do something, or you may see, especially when you see specific talents in your kids that they don't want to pursue, and that's so hard because just like, oh, if you would just put your time into this. But at the same time, that's not my burden to bear, and that's theirs to bear. And so that energy of watching what gives them life and how to motivate them into the things that they do care about, but also being aware enough to withhold things from them so that they learn to chase, right? Because what happens is you can get a child and Nicoa, you have kids of your own, you want to give them everything, and sometimes one of the best givings you can give them is to not give and to let them understand what it's like to want something for themselves and to fight for it. And I have seen my 14-year-old and my 12-year-old specifically, because they're at that age, labor through some of the most toughest relationship issues, and they have come out on the other side a better person. Like, I'm in tears talking to them about how proud I am, because I've watched them, and you want to just come in and like mix the cake for yourself. Like, cause I've been through this. I was your age, but you're like, no, I'm going to hold back. I need to watch them swing on these monkey bars and make sure that they're safe, but I need to give them the ability to take those risks in relationships, in their own little career endeavors in school or whatever. And so that energy leadership portion is understanding training them to manage their own energy. That's what it is as a parent.
And learn what they're making their world mean, and how, and if they're making it mean that, then they may have to keep going down that path with that partner, or, it's been interesting. I wish I knew what I know now back when I was raising them. I can't do the 2020, because I pretty much was although they're very independent, 2 of the 3, one's still in college, the other 2 are out self-sustaining, tax paying, they got jobs and places to live, and they're not hurting anybody, and they seem really happy. So I'm like, well, we did something right. But there is this part of me that was the snowplow parent. The snowplow parent said, let me help you write that email. Oh, let me make that 2 phone calls for you. Let me make it easier. And I wondered in reflection on that recently, my parents were kind of like, good luck, 70s and 80s. You're like, where are they? Open the front door. Come on home. That's like, where are you? If you were home by, sunset, you were doing pretty well. Like, they didn't, we're in people's houses. Nobody knew where we were.
Nobody. No cell phones.
No cell phone. And half the time I'm home alone, piddling around, walking in the creek, like doing nothing, bored at watching MTV, living my best life. So in retrospect, when my kids showed up, I'm like, let me engage, because I didn't have a lot of engagement. So let me engage more. Well, tell me more. They're pretty savvy though, because they learned how to set boundaries with me, and you'll watch your kids do the same, where I'm like, well, can I read your college application? Nope. They said no. Oh. I said, oh my God. So you and I are both writers. I mean, I have a communications degree. Yep. I have not been able to help one child with their application essay. It was so painful, but they all got in. Yeah.
I completely agree. And to your point, being in HR, and I'm trying to get my daughter to like fill out an application for work, and I'm just like, I want to do it for her, but at the same time, it doesn't help her, right? So I love that description, snowplow parent, because you're teaching your kids, you're training your kids how not to, they don't have a resistance tolerance, right? So
it's interesting to watch my youngest right now, because we kind of had to pull the rug out from under her. So I've been snow plowing quite a bit with that young one.
It's the young, they get the advantages, right?
Yeah, or the disadvantages, because because all of a sudden I'm like, well, I can't help you with that. I'm not in a position to help you with that right now. You're going to have to go figure that out. And they're like, what? Oh my God. So I wish I could have done it a little less of a rug rip, but So tell us about homeschooling, because I more and more people are choosing to do that. We did it for a hot minute, but it was more out of just, we put them on an academy instead of, I wasn't really doing it myself, but tell me what you guys are doing.
Yeah. So fortunately, Michelle is very passionate about homeschooling, and whereas I'm not as passionate about it, or at least at first I wasn't. And then now I'm like, I'm really sold on it. Right. But it was more of a causality, because we were just noticing that there was some severe bullying at school, and to the point where I was furious. Like, there's mad and then there's furious. And I was basically like, I'm going to go up there to the school and we're going to have some problems because this type of bullying is unreal. Right. And so
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's terrible. And it's one of those things I'm glad it happened, but I hate that it happened because the fact that it happened meant that we had to respond. And because it happened, now our kids have such a high self-esteem and high self-value, which they wouldn't have if they stayed in that environment unchecked,
Mm-hmm.
Now, so all that to say, so now that we're currently homeschooling them and, Michelle that's her full-time job. She works in this homeschool community once a week. And then of course, teaching the kids throughout the week. And they have just been thriving in that environment, just all of them, all four of them.
And the age range again, 14,
12, 10, and 9.
Okay.
And they've been homeschooled for about 4 years total. Like my two youngest kids have not gone to public school at all.
Okay. I think that's phenomenal. I think we need to kind of take back control over what education means and looks like and sounds like. And I really enjoyed the 2 years we did. And one of the reasons we took our kids out is because we were just watching the cultural influence of it. Like what they were doing in their free time was going to the mall and shopping not shopping.
And that's the problem too, is it's all of this like mind numbing, materialistic. And it's really tough because, and if you got to send your kids to public school, then you got to do what you got to do. But at the same time, it was getting to a point where the teachers didn't even want to tell us what the kids were working on. So we couldn't even help them with you're talking second and third grade. Like, what do you mean you can't tell us what they're working on? So it was becoming more exclusive of this is a public school community and, at home is y'all's own life. I'm like, no, these are supposed to merge. This is a partnership, and it just was not the case. It wasn't the case.
Well, I think that anybody listening, if you've ever considered it, I'd highly recommend it. There are multiple friends that we have that have their kids at home as well. And even if you did it, even if you could do it in a combination, if your kid happens to be smart enough to be able to take some classes at like the community college or at the university, supplement them. Get those other classes, get them exposed to other things. And, even if it's just camps. Campbell's going to graduate a year early because of going to Cape Fear Community College while she was in high school.
And it does help. It does. Yeah, and I'll add something to that, because you're asking, like, how do we, like, manage our kids as we're growing up? And this is another real component to it, is understanding how to – basically, how are we thinking about our kids' emotional state of mind, right? And it's so important for us to be able to build. Like, I don't want my kids graduating and not knowing what we think about them in all circumstances and everyone, and they need to know that. Like, you see in a kind of a contrast where again, if you have to public school, it's fine, but don't be disconnected from your kids' lives. Right? That's the part. And there is a sense of separation of, I'm home from work, I'm tired, kids, y'all go do your work. And there's that disconnection of a whole social life and educational life that's separate from that homeschool experience.
So talk to me about your career. Let's segue to that. Yeah. So how are you enjoying the path that you took? Wasn't a straight line. It was squiggly lined and a couple of hiking paths and it's over here. And
yeah, it's 100% the case.
When did you decide HR? Because I'm sure you told me this, but tell everybody.
No, I may not have told you this specifically because, again, I was doing what I didn't realize was HR for years. And then I was looking back and was like, oh, yeah, that was some work. But what I realized is, as I was doing the sales engineering work at a small company in Apex, there was this HR lady, and she was amazing. It was crazy how she knew your kids. She would talk to you. She felt so and I was like, you could joke with her about anything, and you felt like you could have a conversation with her that was just open and transparent, but at least and I just said, and I was really inspired by her. And I've since, messaged her multiple times to tell her how much of an inspiration she was, even though she's retired now. But that was a real catalyst for me to think, okay, which direction do I want to go? Do I want to go into a sales route, a management route, or do I want to go into HR route? And just thinking about how I work as a stronger support person, I felt like that was the better direction. So I told myself, there's 2 careers that I want. Number 1, full-time writer. Number 2, if I can't do that, HR. HR pays the bills, and at least I love it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I love that. And so what was your first opportunity? Were you able to get a client group while you were working with her? Or did you just apply for the job at Red Hat and get the job?
That is a crazy deep question. So so believe it or not, I
remember when you went to Red Hat because I wrote a letter.
Yeah, you did. You wrote a recommendation letter to the hiring manager whom you knew from another job. I think it was either GE or maybe GSK, one of those 2. And that was very it helped so much. And so looking at that experience, basically, so believe it or not, I got promoted at my sales job, and then I got fired from that job.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
And I was like, what the heck, And so it was really tough. And I said, well, this is where I'm at. Why don't I just go ahead and go to school? I've already taken the GRE, this is the perfect time to, again, back to the beginning of the conversation, really making the best of that moment, because you can get laid off or get fired and be like, all right, I'm done. What am I going to do with my life? Or you can get fired and figure out how am I going to take the reins of this. And I went back home that same day that I got fired. It was the middle of the day. And I told my wife, and she was obviously pretty sad about it. And she's like, well, how are you feeling? I was like, well, let's just go to the pool. So we took the kids to the pool. We didn't have anything else to do, right? I had the whole day off at that point. So I went to the pool and rethought life. And basically, the short of it is, first getting that role was I applied for a temp job after, as I was getting my degree, and it became back as an accounts receivable job. And I was like, I'll take whatever, fine. This is a good starting point. Well, that assignment was over. And then they tried to give me another accounting job. And I was like, I don't want another accounting job. I want an HR. Well, they hunted for a few more weeks and found a role that was somewhat HR. It was just somewhat. But I met now one of my best family friends. We've gotten to know her. And she was a hiring manager, and she hired me to this job only because I had an HR experience. She said it came down to me and one other candidate. And after that, I got that role, and I just soaked up whatever HR information I could, did everything I could for that company. And such is life. I went 2 other companies and then got the Red Hat dream job.
That's right. That's right. I just love it. I'm
coincidentally
so proud of you.
Drinking from Red Hat cup now.
Look at you, got the Red Hat cup. I got my Budapest Starbucks cup going on.
That's it, right?
It's all connected.
It's all connected. Yeah.
Well, I think it's really beautiful. And the key thread that if people have been watching me for a long time, listening to me, the thread here is that you're the common denominator of this life. Yeah. And that can either be very annoying or that can be very liberating. And it seems to me that you have chosen to choose the liberating side of that, not that knowing. And once you recognize that I'm responsible for responding, I'm capable of responding, then, I have that ability to choose what I want to do next. So the key for me has been to not make where I am, to not judge it in some way as being taking me back to where, this is what I thought it was going to be. And what I remember every day is to remind myself that this is just where you're supposed to be right now for something even better. And it always gets better. It always does, even if things can be like a roller coaster, but ultimately your way of being and your knowledge, and maybe it's just wisdom. Maybe it's not all the beautiful coaching I think it is, but something even better emerges. Tell me what you're working on now and what's really lighting you up in life right now.
Yeah. So it's kind of a couple of things. You probably saw my video where I'm picking up rollerblading. And
yes. I love that. But is that a picture of you falling and hurting your chin from rollerblading?
So this was a dog bite. This is like so simple.
I missed that.
I didn't really post much of that. It was a dog bite, and that was at the beginning of the year. But the whole rollerblading thing was, I've like most people grew up skating, but I've never rollerbladed. So I started to do that recently, and it's different. It's tougher. And to your point, though, I did fall really hard a couple times, and I've gotten hurt a couple times recently.
How's your tailbone? That's the
tailbone.
Part. Yeah.
So my tailbone's sore. My wrist is sore. So it's like I got all of these like. You got it. So you know exactly what I'm experiencing, right? And one time I fell, and all of them have been bad. This one was probably the worst. I fell, and this was a few weeks ago, and I felt like I like popped my tricep. Fortunately, I don't think I did, but it was so much pain. I've never been in that much pain before, even after a surgery, right? And I was just sitting there on the ground, Nicoa, and I thought, is this really what I want to do? I really was thinking that. Is this really what I want to do? And I just said, what I don't want to do is to be stagnant, right? And I said, if I got this pain from doing what I love, then let me just get up and keep trying. And I'm not making this up. This is not for the podcast. I really thought this through. And I got up and went inside that day. Couldn't skate anymore. I was like, that hit hard. But the next day, like, let's go and try it out. I just kind of kept myself a little more secure because I wasn't still in pain. But, I'm loving it. And I'm like, hey, if I get hurt doing stuff that I would want to do and love, then that's what it's about. That's what we did when we were kids. You take risks, and that's how you learn to ride a bike and, all of this stuff, right?
I'm so proud of you. I mean, think about all those athletes we're watching right now in the Olympics, and they're like, well, she had 3 ACL tears, and she came back and so-and-so's kidneys weren't working, and and that was just 9 months ago, and look at her. She just won a silver medal. I'm like, I actually thought when you were telling that story, and half of our listeners thought this too, if not more, that you were like, is this really what I want to do? Do I really want to risk hurting myself and not be... But you didn't say that. I love that you... Do I really want to keep having fun? Yes, I do.
Yeah, I do.
And if I hurt myself doing it, I don't care. Now,
I don't care.
I'm right there with you. I'm taking care of my mother at the moment. So she's 84, and I'm watching her wobble down the hallways with her walker and the PT 3 times a week and the pain and the medications. And I'm like, no. Yep. I cannot do it. So she's role modeling that we need to keep moving, to your point. Yep. We need to keep rollerblading. You need to keep risking it and moving your body and stretching. And oh my God. It's so weird, this thing we call life. And notice how many belief systems influence our choices. Mm-hmm. I'm proud of you for rollerblading. Yeah. Why did you think rollerblading?
That's another good question. It was really a coincidence. My daughter wanted a skate birthday party, and we all went skating. And I was like, I said, I've always done the quad skates. Let me try rollerblading for the first time. So I tried it out, and it was not the greatest experience. I was like, okay, I'm learning. And I was like, I actually love this. So I went and got skates for all of us. My kids love it. So it's a great thing for us to do as a family. If I say, hey, y'all want to go skating? They drop in video games. They're dropping anime. Everything is dropped, right? So
good.
It's a good time to get them out and moving. They, ask them to go outside and jog or lift weights. No, not doing that. But skating, they're game for it. So
it's play. That's why it's play. Right. Yeah, I wish you guys lived closer. I'd have y'all take me over to the Flip and Fly. I really want to do that, and there's nobody around that wants to. And I don't want to be the creepy 55-year-old lady who goes to Flip and Fly by herself on a Wednesday.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
I don't want to be that weirdo. Like, why is she here?
Yeah, like, what are you doing? Yeah, that's exactly true. Once you add a kid to the mix, you can do whatever you want, right?
Exactly. I gotta find somebody's kid. I'll make sure I know them. I won't just grab
no random kids.
No random kids. Oh my God, William, this is awesome. You really have reminded me of the importance of play, and then really pursuing anything. Like, I love that you're just like, I'll try that. I want to try that. Let me go try that. Yeah. As a matter of fact, you'll be proud of me. I signed up for, how right now in the Olympics, they have that, the rowing where it's a team. Like
I love that.
or The Boys in the Boat, like that movie.
Yeah. Yeah,
so
love it.
I always wanted to row, and I never knew how. And every time I looked it up, it was like 5 a.m., get up and go all the way across town to the river. So they have a class, and I signed up for August 24th. It's 90 minutes. They tell you what to wear, and you show up, and you have to be able to be strong enough to lift the boat over your head, which I'm like, I can do that. I'm strong.
Yeah, I can do that.
I can do that. And so I'm going to go, and I'm going to learn how to row. And who knows, maybe that's something that I'll do in the future. But I'm just so proud of myself.
That would be amazing. And rowing is, it's going to be a workout for sure. You're going to have an idea.
I'm going to be so strong.
So strong, but also being out on the water and just, it's an escape, I'm sure, and that's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot of fun.
It's also with a team. And I think right now I do a lot of solo things that I do love, but I have also uncovered that connection is pretty critical. And I would like to know what it would like to be on a real team. I did cheer with the team at state, which was great, but that was a very individual sport. So it's kind of like the team when you watch the gymnasts, and they do love each other, but there's a little bit, you feel that little gap.
There's a gap.
There's a gap.
There's not that oneness. Yeah, that oneness that you really like to see on the
I wonder what oneness would feel like. Have you ever been in a team sport before?
Yeah, so of course, football is a team sport, played that in high school. But then to your point, I ran track. It's a team sport, but it's different. Wrestling is a team sport, but it's different, right?
Yeah.
And so I did all three of those. But there's that real individual attention that you have in track and wrestling where, you cheer for that other person, but at the same time, one person's movement doesn't make your movement. Whereas in football, if I go here, I need to make sure that my teammate is here, right?
I wish I had found that bond at NC State. It was unfortunately because it was so individually competitive in the beginning. In the end, I don't think we ever really bonded. But that might have just been me.
It can also be. It can be two things, right?
Could have been me. Not really my thing. Even though everybody in my world wanted me to do it, I was like, I don't know about this.
Right.
So, well, I look forward to seeing what that's like, and you're inspiring me. Talk to me about, are you writing right now? Is there any other projects, anything you want to share with our listeners?
Yeah, so right now I had this like 5-year writing break. It was what I would call a writer's freeze, not a writer's block. And I'll give you a brief difference.
Was this after I gave you the bourbon? Maybe I shouldn't have given you the whiskey.
Yeah, that whiskey messed me up. I was like, what in the world? I can't get enough of this stuff, right? right on time, right? But so what happens, I think, and I haven't heard writer's freeze, but I call it this. Like writer's block is I just don't know what to write next, I would say, right? Writer's freeze is I don't want to mess up. And that is crazy because I was like, I've written such a great story that now I have all of these different paths that I can choose from. And I'm afraid to take one that's going to take me down the wrong road. And it was very eye-opening, Nicoa, last year. I was reading several projects that I had started and not finished. And I just read through them. It was probably like 6 or 7 projects that I'd started and not finished, 20,000 words in. And I would read them and stop at about 15,000 to 20,000 words. I just stopped at that point every time. And I'm like, why am I stopping at this 15,000 and 20,000 word mark? And then I realized what it was. That first act was done. And then I had to decide, what is that character going to do next? And every time I didn't want to commit. Every time I didn't want to commit. And I said, the thing that I loved about writing was the freedom. And I have put myself in my own prison. I really thought this way. And so I said, I am stopping that now. And I took one of those projects and I finished the book. And like 2 months later, finished the book, and now I'm on book 2 of that same project. Because I was like, I can't keep doing this to myself, right? I have allowed myself to be free. And then I've created my own jail every time,
What do you think that block, though, in that moment was? You said fear of not getting it right, or was there something that you think triggered? Was it because you turned it away from being fun and you turned it into a job or an obligation?
Nicoa. It is the F word, failure. It is.
And yet
really...
you'd already published. You had already been successful.
Yep.
So what do you think? What do you mean by failure? I love this question.
It's a deep question. I keep saying that, but the fear of failure is always success becomes your new floor, right?
I see.
I've written a book and now I can't go lower than that. And we've created this world of climbing a ladder as if to say it's all a ladder, right? And so it's like if I go one rung down, I have failed. If I go if I get off of the ladder, if I change careers, I have failed. If I decided I've invested this money in college and I don't commit to it, I have failed. And I realized on those 15,000 or 20,000 word projects, and I'm like having a new revelation as I'm talking to you about this, it is, I don't have to be constrained by my previous successes. It's crazy.
Wow.
Simone Biles will never be able to do this when she's 40 years old. But she can't look back and say, when I was 25, when I was 29, or whenever, She has to find her new successes. And I think we can all learn a future lesson from young Simone right now.
I think we can. And, you already, our entire conversation was about the power of all of those changes. Right? It was like, and then I chose to do this and I chose to do that. But clearly that underlying fear, uncertainty, and doubt that we all carry is that was a failure. I used to think all those things I quit. My friend said, you didn't quit. You listened to your intuition and you simply adjusted your path. She's like, that's not quitting. That's adapting. That's adjusting. That's moving towards what feels better. And what more beautiful place to be than on planet Earth to be able to experiment. Because my daughter says she gets paralyzed because she wants to try everything. She wants to study everything. She wants to do everything. And I'm like, okay, we're going to have to hone that in. You're about to graduate, so we need to figure out what you're going to do.
Yeah, there's a limiting factor to your exploits.
She was a barista at Starbuck. So she's in good company.
She knows. I'm going to have to
make sure she listens to this interview. So it's interesting that you still carried the, oh my God, well, I did publish that, but it's got to be even better. No, it doesn't. Do you want to publish another book or not? That's all that's all it has to be.
That's the yes, no question. Do you want to go down this path or not? And that's the problem is we don't know what the path, gosh, I don't want to get all metaphorical, but we don't know what the path is going to bring, right? But if I would have never written that first book, I would still be wrapped up in this depression and this mental anxiety that I was in, right? And that was the freeing part, the creative world that I didn't know I had within myself. And you could say that about my entire career. I mean, the fact that I was a detention officer, loved that part of my life, right? Crazy as it was. I mean, some of the craziest stories happened in 7 months, but I loved it.
I think you've got a phenomenal career. I want you to I mean, we could talk all day, as I always say.
As
I always say. But we need more coffee, okay?
That's right. We always. We
got to go to a Starbucks and do the next interview. Yes. I want to ask you, though, what do you want to celebrate the most about your life by design now?
So that's got me thinking on the line of, so I'll say this and clean it up, okay? What I want to celebrate the most about myself is always a tough question, but it's that I don't let people change me. And what I mean by that is not what you've likely heard. Don't let people change you. See, it's easy to say that when we're just making our normal everyday choices, whether I want to go to this job, but it's not so easy to say that when someone has hurt us, right? And when someone's done something offensive to us, or when and the short of it is, there was multiple times in my career, but one of them in particular, multiple times this kind of thing has happened. But one of my best friends, I got him a job. He turned on me and he tried to get me fired from that same job.
Oh my.
And it's just a brutal story. I was in the back talking to another friend about it, just rage crying. You know what I mean? Like, how could this happen? And I knew, he didn't know that I knew, but I could have gotten him back, right? And I said, that's not who I am. And so I made sure that I did not cross the boundary of becoming someone I didn't want to be. So when I say I don't let people change me, it's even in my worst moments. And you'll know, like, I went on to, after that happened, I talked to him about it. And I let it go, forgave him for it. Whatever help he needed, I was there for him, right? Would I expect him to, would I depend on him? No. But I said, I will always make sure that that I'm not the reason for his own failure, right? And I was like, that's the person I want to be. And they're like, William, why do you let him run over you? I said, no, he never ran over me once. I made this choice. If I let him change me, then he's run over me. And that's true for so many different instances in life and careers. I will not let people change the person I want to be. And that is very hard, especially in those situations, as I'm sure you know.
I do know. And I'm so proud of you. And that's you aligning to what matters most to you. And that's the first question. What does matter to us? I mean, we have to be able to sit down and really reflect on not just the list, family, community, love, but what is the way of being and how does that show up behaviorally in your life by design? And I'm so proud of you for staying true to you. And I always say when people come to work with me, my job is to help you find your true north by rediscovering your authentic self. Because it is in that authenticity that makes it very clear, oh, well, this is how I would behave, because this is who I am. And this is how I align myself to these values. So, yeah, that could be some drama if I wanted to go have some revenge right there. But no, you move on and you keep going. And if you can lift, even when somebody was trying to pull you back in, you pull them back out, like help them. That aligns with your values. So I celebrate that with you. I think that's phenomenal. Yep. Now, how can people find you? I know you're busy over there Googling and Geminiing it or whatever it is y'all are called now.
Just right. Googling and Gemini. So you can obviously find me on Amazon, but williamstadler.com is a brief website where you can find just, how to connect with me, at least on the book side. But usually that's the best way, one of those two avenues.
And then if you really want to watch this fun, beautiful man and his life, you can go to your Instagram account too.
Yeah, Instagram.
At Stadlerverse. I love that, Stadlerverse. You definitely have a Stadlerverse, and I'm glad to be in it. I think it's fun being your friend, and I appreciate everything you had to say today, especially about recognizing the power of our mental health and taking responsibility for that. Your beautiful role modeling of creativity. And you know what? I bet there's people today talking about what a great HR partner you are. And I'm glad that you had that woman that you worked under and you are continuing her legacy now that she's retired. Thank you for sharing your legacy with us. And I'm just so glad. I just love you.
Yeah, same here. Love you too, Nicoa. Like, I just have always appreciated our friendship and connection for all these years. It's crazy, but it's just been amazing. So,
well, I'm sure that we'll reconnect again. Let's have a date a year from now and see what all's unfolded.
That's so true. So true.
All right. I love you. I'll talk to you soon.
Love you too. Yeah. Take care.
Take care.
Thanks for joining us for a caffeinated conversation. Subscribe to Coffee with Nicoa for more stories from people living a life by design. You can also find inspiration on Instagram. Just follow Coffee with Nicoa. And check out our website, coffeewithnicoa.com. And that's Nicoa, Nicoa. We look forward to talking with you soon, and enjoy your coffee between now and then.